Hello YouTube, I have another tale of genetics for you today. So back in, I think it was March, I published the first two tales of genetics, one talking about a very gifted powerlifter that I've met, one about the most talented bodybuilder that I had personally ever witnessed. And today we're going to talk about something a little bit different. I'm going to tell you about the time I met someone who I firmly believed was the most gifted in terms of physical abilities when it came to actually lifting weights. And it's going to be a story that's going to be a bit different because that person never actually lifted, they never actually trained. Even though I tried my best to get them to, I could never manage. And you're going to understand why. So I met this person in one of my classes in college. It was one of those classes where there's 25 people. Usually they are coming from all sorts of different majors because the class was sort of, generalistic. So I didn't know the guy. But the second I saw him, I was fascinated by his body, as weird as it sounds, because he had a he had proportions and limb size that I had never seen on a human being before. And it's the reason why I picked that thumbnail, by the way. As offensive as it might sound, he had the same proportions that a monkey would have. He had incredibly long arms. He had a very stacked torso, but his legs were also somehow smaller in length than the torso. So he was very small to start with. He was something like 5 feet. And he had long, greasy, dark hair, glasses. He was the stereotypical nerd. And I confirmed that very quickly because I sat next to him and we talked a little bit. And so he was into League of Legends, he would play video games all the time, etc. And because I used to be into those activities, we had a good talk. And he was quite the character, that guy. He would bring four locos to the class, and he would down these as we spoke, as the class was being taught. Teacher never really caught up for some reason. He would drink Mountain Dew. Talking to him, I realized that he never drank water. He just never touched water. He would only drink sweet beverages, which actually a lot of people do that, but it always blows my mind that some people are able to survive on that. And as we spoke, I also realized he was sort of eccentric. He didn't have the best personal hygiene. He had a tough time relating to people. He was quite blunt. He always said what was on his mind, etc. So that was sort of his personality, and that's interesting in a sense. But the most interesting part was, as I said, the body he had. Because as we spoken and I understood who he was, I also realized that he never trained, he never worked out. For him, he detested physical activities, and yet he had insanely muscular forearms where it looked like he had zero body fat. Like his forearms were just, when you flex your forearm and you can see every single crease and everything like this. His forearms were like this, but when he was resting. And he had, as I said, super long arms. And so usually people who have long arms tend to have stick for forearms. His were massive. And the rest of the arm wasn't that big. He didn't have big biceps or triceps, but it was toned in a sense, meaning that he had low body fat. I didn't see the rest of his body. I saw his legs and his calves because he wore shorts to class even in winter. And he had the same for his legs, where he had massive calves, but he had low body fat. So I don't know if it was just on these areas of his body or if the entire body was like this. But for someone who never drank water, who clearly had a terrible diet because he would just eat whatever, he would bring nachos to class, he had an amazing hormonal profile. His body was incredibly anabolic. But that's not all, because that's just muscle. What was shocking, as I said, is his arms were insanely long, where when he was standing up and his arms were to the side, most people that are going to get to a certain level, I swear, his hands were about knee level. That's how long his arms were. And because his torso was so short, it was even more exaggerated. He had tiny legs. And looking at him, you would think that he was created in a lab, like a mad scientist tried to create the best possible powerlifter on earth because looking at him, I could tell if I could get him into a gym, he could lift insane amount of weight with no training because he was muscular. I don't know how much he weighed, but for someone so small, he was quite stocky, even with no training. He had perfect leverage for the deadlift. He had perfect leverage for the squat. He had tiny femurs, a torso that he was squat. There's a reason why we call those people squat, is because they're great for squatting. So squat and deadlift, he would have been amazing. I don't know about bench because his arms were really long, but you can win powerlifting competitions with just an amazing squat and deadlift and a bad bench. And so I tried. That's what I usually do when I see people with a lot of potential, be it in bodybuilding, powerlifting, whatever. I try to get them to lift. If they lift, I try to get them to think about their program, because usually what you understand with these people, what you end up finding out is that because everything comes so easy, they never really think about it. They just do whatever, and whatever works. But if you can get them to follow an actual regimen, you can turn them into monsters. And that guy didn't even do that. He didn't even train. The previous 2 tales of genetics, those people were training, albeit not it wasn't optimal, but this guy wasn't even training. So I was thinking, if he's that muscular right now with zero resistance training, what will he look like if I can get him to train? So I tried to coax him into going to the gym with me just to see how much he could deadlift, and I never could because he just didn't care. He just didn't want to. And I think he never really realized the potential he had because he didn't care about that type of activity. One thing too that was insane was his hands. He had just gigantic hands with super long fingers. So who grip would have came naturally to him? It was a sad realization to see someone with that amount of gifts in one area that just wouldn't do anything with him. With those gifts. And I'm sure that this guy still doesn't lift. He's still, out there looking like a shaved chimp, just amazingly muscular with perfect leverages, and he's never going to use them. And I usually don't have morals for these because they're just stories, they're just tales, but it also goes to show that potential is good, being gifted is good, but at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter because if you don't apply those gifts, they're for nothing. And it's the same for you too. Maybe you're not gifted, but just by applying yourself, you're already going to be outdoing a ton of people. And if you push that logic, even people who are gifted, if you outwork them, you're going to be better than them. At the end of the day, you shouldn't be comparing yourself to others, but just for your own sake and your peace of mind, don't worry too much about your genetics. Don't worry too much about what you had when you started because there's guys like this that started with godlike genetics and are never going to get anywhere. So just worry about yourself, work the best you can, and you're going to turn those bad genetics into something sublime just through hard work and reflection. So that's that for this style of genetics. I have others in mind, but I might not release them right now because there's a different type of transformative video that I'm going to start publishing on the channel. You can expect the first of these types in the middle of September, so maybe in 2 weeks. And these are going to be taking a lot of time. So as far as tales and telling stories, I think that you are going to get your fill. Thank you for watching. Have a good day.